Tonight, live from Riyadh, Donald Trump signs a $600 billion deal with Saudi Arabia on his first foreign trip since he took office. An arms agreement, but big policy shifts too, an olive branch to Iran, lifting sanctions on Syria and possible face-to-face talks to end the war in Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is on his way to Turkey. Could he be joined by Vladimir Putin and maybe even Donald Trump?
Talks are being held in Turkey later this week, probably on Thursday, and they could produce some pretty good results.
And coming up, two big celebrity trials in New York and Paris went live in both cities.
Today, nearly a decade after she was robbed at gunpoint, Kim Kardashian confronted a group of so-called grandpa robbers and told a court she thought she'd be raped and killed.
And here in New York, the former girlfriend of music mogul P. Diddy, the singer Cassie Ventura, describes how the rapper blackmailed her with videos filmed during drug-fueled so-called freak-offs.
Plus, what happens when the diplomacy collides with the family business? We'll take you through all the deals signed for Trump plc and ask, is his family's penchant for a profit becoming a political problem? All that coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening, live from Riyadh, and tonight, about a half an hour's drive from here, in the birthplace of the Saudi state, Donald Trump is attending an intimate state dinner put in his honor. It's the first day of the US president's four-day trip to this region, and ever the deal maker, Mr. Trump says he wants to secure business agreements worth more than $1 trillion. But it's the change in his rhetoric that has been most striking. Yes, he described Iran as by far the biggest, most destructive force in the Middle East, but he also offered a new, better path if Tehran started talks now. Syria is no longer the enemy. His confirmation that sanctions would be lifted was greeted with applause. But Saudi Arabia recognizing Israel appeared to be a step too far, and Mr. Trump acknowledged the country would have to normalize relations in its own time. We'll discuss this shifting sands in the region in a moment, but let's get started with a report from our US correspondent, Mark Stone.
It was an air escort fit for a king. Saudi fighter jets flanking Air Force One on the president's approach into a place where he feels comfortable. If the Saudi-US relationship has had its ebbs, well, it feels now like it's flowing. Down to the tie with the carpet, there is a match between this president and the Crown Prince here to greet him. Just as he did in his last term, Donald Trump has chosen Saudi Arabia again for his first major foreign trip. Now, though, they are two leaders more confident, more powerful, more self-assured, and they see opportunities and money. This was the full Saudi welcome from a country transformed so fast, where change that took Western nations centuries has happened here in one generation. Trump the president was here, but so too was Trump the businessman. In a gilded palace and with America's most successful CEOs with him, he must have felt quite at home. The so-called tech bros had traveled thousands of miles to be here. The richest man in the world, Elon Musk, and the man shaping AI, Sam Altman, among a long list of founders and CEOs from some of the world's biggest companies here for investment. Because symbiosis is what all this is about. It's about what America can offer Saudi Arabia, but now more than ever, it's about what the Saudis can do for America. And so the signing ceremony was the first order of the day, and the jewel in the crown, a $600 billion strategic economic partnership deal with the Saudis, including the largest defense sales agreement in history, we're told.
This is, of course, a relationship that stretches back many, many decades through consecutive presidencies and one royal family. But it feels now to be more important and with more opportunity than ever before.
The president got the trip down memory lane as he arrived at the investment forum. Inside, the soundtrack was his, playing now in Riyadh, and with a smattering of MAGA hats. The American cabinet, the Saudi royal court, and the billionaires' front row.
You achieved a modern miracle, the Arabian way. That's a good way.
For his speech of the day.
And it's crucial for the wider world to note this great transformation has not come from Western intervention, giving you lectures on how to live and how to govern your own affairs. Instead, the birth of a modern Middle East has been brought by the people of the region themselves.
Well, that was a pretty remarkable speech, despite the tariffs and the upending of the world order that we've seen over the past few months. The message there was that America is open for business, politically, economically, ready to build bridges, put differences to one side, and work with all countries in this region, even Yemen, Syria, and Iran.
A key headline was Syria. He said he's scrapping sanctions against the country, now free from Assad. It comes as the White House revealed that he is due to meet Syria's new president, once a jihadi fighting the Americans. They'll meet in the day ahead.
He seems to be suggesting he's ready to do business with Iran, with Syria, if they play their cards right.
Presidents, first of all, a global peace also needs global partnership. The president's businessman in a way, as you can see with the tariff, he meant good. He made a deal first with your prime minister, which I think was great. He made a deal with China yesterday, and now he's willing to sit down at the table. He only wants peace.
It might confuse some people. When he's doing his speeches in America, it's all about America first. We don't really care about the rest of the world, seems to be the vibe. And then here, it was a wholly different message, I felt.
I think there's a misperception. I think the truth is that he obviously cares about peace around the world. And he spent his entire, 4 or 5 months of his administration sending his emissaries around the world to create peace deals, right?
If he went on for another hour, I could have sat there. The way he did it, the tone of his voice, and the points that he chose. I mean, if you want from a point of social, you want a point from political, you want a point from business, you want a point from defense, you want a point from technology. He covered all those and just did it in such a elegant way.
The evening was the state banquet. The morning will bring the diplomacy. He'll meet key Arab leaders before travelling on to Qatar, where they will surely try to outdo the spectacle today.
And Mark is here with me, and we'll be talking to Mark about that extraordinary speech and, of course, geopolitics in a moment. But first, let's just have a quick look at what was agreed here in Riyadh today. Let's talk you through that step by step. Now, the $600 billion deal has been described as historic and transformative and includes an arms agreement worth $142 billion. The White House describes it as the largest defense sales agreement in history. It covers Air Force equipment, air and missile defense, maritime security, border security, and communication systems, all provided by more than a dozen American firms. And it includes investments in energy, aerospace, sports, and AI as well. Well, let's bring in our correspondent, Mark Stone, who, of course, was in the room. It felt like there was extraordinary energy, Mark, in the room. I mean, it certainly has felt like a buzz here, in the sort of 24 hours before he arrived, and, of course, in that room.
Yeah, a group of people who couldn't be more far removed than the MAGA faithful that you see in the sports halls of places like Pennsylvania. Excuse me. But the mood, the tone, the vibe felt very similar. It felt kind of like a MAGA rally in the sense that people were so thrilled by what they heard. Yalda, you and I were talking yesterday about wondering what the thrust of today would be, and this week, what the dominant story would be. Would it be Ukraine? Would it be Gaza? What would it be? we didn't expect, I think, that it was going to be tone instead of a particular story, but it was tone for me from Donald Trump. Yeah, of course, he sounded kind of the same, but it was what he was saying. He was almost, you know, as I said in my report there, we've had all the chaos of the past, as Europe would certainly see it, or Canada, of the past few months. And we've had the tariffs. But what he was now saying effectively is, yeah, America is open for business. You do it on our terms, yes, but we're open for business economically, and we're open for business politically. And he was talking to Iran, you know, directly to the Iranians effectively, talking to Syria, talking to the Houthis in Yemen, and saying that you want to do business with us, you know, politically, you want to be on our side, you're welcome, we're open.
Yeah, and you know, Mark, the relationship between the United States and Saudi has always been transactional. It's just other administrations, the Obama administration, the Biden administration, have found it slightly uncomfortable. But this is Donald Trump's comfort zone. And I thought what was interesting also, alongside the pomp and ceremony that we saw, and the lavish nature of everything, was Donald Trump couldn't keep away from the geopolitics of all of this. I mean, as you say, we talked about Syria, you know, we talked about the Iran deal, and in many ways, normalization came up as well.
Yeah, and it was, you know, as you say, other American presidents, they have found it uncomfortable. They found it uncomfortable to be among the opulence that there is everywhere here. But they also have found the recent history uncomfortable. You know, Mohammed bin Salman, Saudi Arabia was frozen out because of, you know, the human rights, because of the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, all of that sort of thing, completely frozen out. To Donald Trump, that doesn't matter. This is political expedience that he's recognizing. He needs Saudi Arabia needs him, and he will do the same in Qatar and the United Arab Emirates. I imagine they were watching today and working out how they can beat that. But yeah, it's a new world that Donald Trump was painting a picture of, a new Middle East. But he only very briefly mentioned the big problem, the elephant in the room, the Palestinian issue, Gaza. It was just a kind of a side issue in his speech. But as we were discussing before, the Saudis have leverage there now in a way that they haven't before. So let's see where that goes.
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt we'll continue to speak to you, Mark. Thank you so much. Well, I'll be waiting. That was the message from Volodymyr Zelensky as he continues to push President Putin to sit down face-to-face for peace talks in the Turkish capital, not in the Turkish capital, in Istanbul. The Ukrainian president also extended an invitation to Donald Trump. And tonight, the US president confirmed that his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, will be at the table on Thursday. Let's have a...
Russia is not ready for diplomacy. It's been only one side. It's only about Russia. What has been if they will not come, if Putin will not come, or if ceasefire will not be supported by Russians, by Putin, exactly by him. So it's been only one thing, that Russia is not ready for any kind of negotiation.
That was President Zelensky there. Well, let's go straight to Kiev now and speak to our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn. And Dom, I've been here throughout the day in Riyadh, and Donald Trump has raised the idea of perhaps Saudi Arabia can join the Abraham Accords, normalize relations with the Israelis. He's also talked about a potential nuclear deal with Iran. He said he's going to lift sanctions on Syria. He's looking at deals everywhere. But I wonder, you know, in terms of the deal between Ukraine and Russia, he had famously said that he could resolve it in 24 hours. Where does that all sit now? Because Volodymyr Zelensky says, I'm on my way to Turkey, and put this challenge to Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, exactly. So Vladimir Putin, I think, is under some pressure to go to Istanbul, to Turkey, but not as much as Volodymyr Zelensky, who has decided to sort of throw down this gauntlet to the Russian leader. What he did today was to remind the allies, the Europeans, but also nominally at least Donald Trump and the Americans, that they promised over the weekend that they would effectively sort of hold Putin's feet to the fire. If you are committed to peace, they said, then you need to sign up to this 30-day unconditional ceasefire. And if you don't, then you will be punished with sanctions sanctions and more military aid going to Ukraine. Then Donald Trump kind of switched sides and said, well, that's one idea, but the other idea is these talks that Vladimir Putin has proposed, and I quite like that idea. And then Zelensky felt that he had to say that he would go to Istanbul himself, because, of course, Putin had only been proposing kind of levels at the talks at the official level. So he laid down this gauntlet, and we're waiting to see whether Putin will be going to Istanbul or not. I think it's fair to say Ukrainians aren't holding their breath because they don't feel that Trump is putting enough pressure on Putin. He certainly said he believes that both leaders should go, but he's not sort of publicly put the pressure that you might expect to see put on Putin to make him go. The Russians, as far as they're concerned, seem to be worried about a kind of trap. They say that Zelensky is organising some kind of political theatre and they don't want their leaders to get drawn into that. So I think if you're going to bet on this, it's less likely that Putin is going to go. And then the question is, if he doesn't go, is Trump going to punish him for that? I think on past form, that doesn't look likely either. More likely that he will move on, forget about this, and then at some point probably blame Zelensky again for things not going very well. And if he does, then the pressure is back on the Europeans to make good on their word, which over the weekend was that they would punish Putin if he doesn't commit to a ceasefire. If he rejects it, they will punish him with sanctions and more aid to the Ukrainians. We'll have to see if they do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Dom, thank you so much for bringing us up to date there from Kiev. So, possible movement in Europe later this week. Let's bring in Matteo Renzi. He's the former Italian Prime Minister. Thank you so much, Prime Minister, for joining us here on the programme. You're currently in my studio in London, and of course I'm here in Riyadh, but a lot of conversations around perhaps, creating peace deals here in the Middle East, normalizing relations with the Saudis and Israel, but all eyes also on what could potentially happen in Turkey, in Istanbul on Thursday. Volodymyr Zelensky has put this almost challenge to Vladimir Putin, and frankly, it's unlikely that Vladimir Putin will make it there to Istanbul in a few days' time.
I'm here to control your studio. You check your office here in London. But jokes apart, I think two very important issues. The first is about Ukraine. Something changed after the meeting between President Trump and President Zelensky in Vatican, with the support of Prime Minister Starmer and President Macron during the funeral of the Pope Francis, and now finally we see some signals of light. I don't think there will be a meeting between Putin and Zelensky. Lavrov will lead the Russian delegation, probably. Rubio, the American delegation, but I think is a very important step in the direction of diplomacy and peace. And about Middle East, of course, you cover very well the historical visit of President Trump. I prefer President Trump who signed agreement to the President Trump who signed executive order about tariffs, because the President Trump who create cooperation achieved success. I think today is a great success for Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, because finally everyone recognized the strategy of the Vision 2030 and the role of Saudi Arabia. As Mark said, the elephant in the room is the Palestinian question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to get to that with you in a moment in terms of the situation in the Middle East, because, of course, you know Mohammed bin Salman quite well. You also know Vladimir Putin. Do you think that Vladimir Putin is serious about resolving the war in Ukraine, putting the guns down, and eventually coming to some kind of face-to-face meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky, even if it doesn't happen this week?
I think Vladimir Putin, as I know, is a man able to check the relation of power, check of the counterpart. I don't think he will have the meeting in this week. I hope maybe I will do some mistakes, but I think now the way for the peace is ready. So I don't know if this peace will arrive after a meeting between Putin and Trump, or Putin and Trump and Zelensky. I don't know what type of framework will guarantee the peace and the diplomacy. But I think now is interest also for Russia to close the long war. And about bin Salman, I think is a leader who show concretely Middle East is changed thanks to him, to his leadership. And so I think today is a great day also for him, because independently from the money, who is important, of course, but the most important thing is the presence of a lot of CEOs, American CEOs in Saudi, as one of the key countries in the new world.
Yeah, and Prime Minister, there is no doubt that this country has transformed and changed at lightning speed, frankly, in the last few years, especially. And while the focus of this summit, as everyone knew, would be on investment, economics, security, big deals, big business leaders here in the country from the United States meeting their Saudi counterparts. As you say, the big question mark is around the Palestinian issue, which was just slightly touched on during President Trump's speech. Do you think behind closed doors, and you know Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince, do you think he would have mentioned it, discussed it with President Trump, especially around the issue of normalization?
I think there is not possibility to save Middle East without a long and clear and strong solution for Palestinian question. But I think there is not possibility to have the peace in Gaza with the presence in the leadership of Hamas. That is a very complicated point, because that is the only thing really, again, open. If you think about 10 years ago, Middle East 10 years ago was absolutely worse than today. A lot of things are changed and in the good direction. The GCC countries today are stronger and closer, and they play a role very important in the international framework. The only problem will remain, in my opinion, is the situation in Gaza, but it's impossible to have a control of Palestine without an Arabic leadership, but that have to be without Hamas. And that is the last point and the most difficult point to choose. I believe Mohammed bin Salman, but also Tamim al-Thani, but also Sheikh Mohammed in Emirates want to solve and fix the situation, but the presence of Hamas is the last problem to solve.
Yeah, indeed. Matteo Renzi, former Prime Minister of Italy, thank you so much for joining us here on the program. You can look after my studio there while I'm away.
Thank you so much. Good evening.
You're watching The World with me, Yalda Hakim, live from Riyadh, still to come on the program. Day one of his diplomatic tour, so what have we learned about Donald Trump's priorities? I'll ask the editor-in-chief of Arab News. And Kim Kardashian's tearful testimony, the reality star tells a Paris court how she feared for her life during an armed robbery.
secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation futures.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back to the programme and our special coverage from Riyadh. But let's just turn our attention now to the war in Gaza. And Donald Trump noticeably left Israel off his schedule. And despite his repeated demands for a ceasefire, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warned today there's no way he'd pause the war until Hamas is defeated. Tonight, the Israeli Defense Forces confirmed they struck a hospital in southern Gaza, which they claim was being used by Hamas for what they say was terrorist activity. It's led to reports that the leader of Hamas, Mohammed Sinwar, may have been killed in those strikes. Hamas has denied these claims. Let's bring in our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle. And Ali, we were hearing reports a little earlier today that there were some strikes in Khan Yunis near the European hospital that was targeting the new leader of Hamas. Just bring us up to date.
Yeah, massive strikes on the European hospital. I mean, the pictures filmed by people who are nearby show a series like a chain of explosions and plumes of black smoke, terrifying for anyone close to it. Looks as though possibly they were using perhaps some sort of bunker-busting bombs. The IDF have, as you say, confirmed that that was the target. They say that they had intelligence that there was a Hamas command and control center underneath the hospital, and although they haven't explicitly come out and said that they were targeting Mohammed Sinwar, you know, that is what we are being told. They believe that he was under the hospital, and Sinwar is a very key figure in Gaza. He became the leader of Hamas in Gaza after his brother Yahya Sinwar, the mastermind of October the 7th, was killed by the IDF in Rafah back in October. Mohammed Sinwar, sources close to some of the mediation talks say that he was particularly stubborn. He's blamed by the Israelis of putting blockers in the way sometimes in progress for the talks to happen. And so we wait to see whether or not his death is confirmed. As you say, Hamas have denied it, but obviously no proof of life. The IDF haven't said one way or the other, but it will be hard for them to confirm it. You know, they'll have to rely on things like perhaps communications intercepts if they do have any human intelligence sources on the ground, because they're not going to get their own boots close to the site of that strike.
Yeah, and Ali, in the meantime, in the last 24 hours or so, we've been getting confirmation that the United States is in talks with Hamas through intermediaries, but nonetheless in talks with Hamas. And an American-Israeli captive taken by Hamas into Gaza on October 7 was released. We saw those images. And of course, we understand that Donald Trump spoke to Idan Alexander today.
Yeah, he spoke to Idan Alexander this evening. I think it was about a 20-minute phone call. And there was initially hoped to be a plan where Idan Alexander would travel to Qatar to meet Donald Trump when he goes there tomorrow. I don't think that's going to happen now. He's still in hospital in Tel Aviv, but Donald Trump said that he can't wait to see him in the White House, and Donald Trump has promised to bring all the remaining 58 hostages home. But, I think there is a real hope, frankly, on all sides, that the release of Ethan Alexander, the successful negotiations that led to his release yesterday, can be used as a platform for something bigger, something more substantial. And Donald Trump, and you've been discussing in your program, is in the Middle East. He's a president who wants wins, and he wants them quickly to be able to announce them. He's got a lot of major foreign policy challenges on his plate at the moment. But and I feel that he's been somewhat disengaged in Gaza for a number of weeks. But the release of Ethan Alexander, you sense, has kind of pulled him back into the Gaza conflict, and we'll see whether or not he can make any progress on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Ali, thank you so much for bringing us up to date there from Jerusalem. So, at the end of day one of Donald Trump's tour, he'll be celebrating the announcement of $600 billion worth of investment from the Saudis. He's also outlined plans to lift sanctions against Syria and reiterated he wants to do a deal with Iran. Well, let's discuss all of this further. I'm joined now by Faisal Abbas, the editor of Arab News, who was at a VIP-packed lunch with Donald Trump, and you were there when he made that speech as well. You've been there for most of the day. Just give us a sense of what it was like in the room, the sort of energy we talked about. Sort of, it really was highly charged energy in there.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Yalda. In terms of energy, I can only describe it as a rock star reception, and it has a lot to do with Donald Trump's persona, but also the messages that he delivered in his speech. I think the Riyadh speech of Donald Trump is going to go down in history, at least in this part of the world, as a very favorable speech. He did pass on several very important messages. First of all, he appeared as a true statesman and a man of peace. I know that's not what perhaps many people might associate him with, but the words are out there, and he did offer Iran an olive branch. He did lift the sanctions on Syria. He did say the Palestinians deserve better. He did say they're working hard with their new ambassador to help rebuild Lebanon. That's going to go and resonate very well in the region. Second point he made was acknowledging U.S. foreign policy mistakes in the region, whether it's by the neocons or the liberals, the interventionist policy, which has caused miserable failures across the region. And last but certainly not least, the acknowledgement of the success story in the GCC, mainly Saudi Arabia, of course, but he also talked about the United Arab Emirates and Qatar, and emphasized that this is a homegrown success story, a model that America is very happy to support and partner, and almost like renewing vows. As you know, this is, when we talk about the Saudi-US relationship, we're talking about 80 years of history, and America has always pledged to come to Saudi's defense if needed be. This now goes beyond reiterating that pledge to saying that America is wholeheartedly, at least under this administration, supportive of the transformation that's going on in this country.
He talked also about alongside all the other issues that you've raised, including Syria, including Lebanon, including a potential nuclear deal with Iran, that he had the fervent hope that there would be some kind of normalization. But he did that with the caveat that, I'm not going to pressure you, Saudi Arabia, you'll do it in your own time. And at this point in time, on the Palestinian question, Saudi Arabia does have leverage, the kind of leverage that they perhaps didn't have before.
Well, absolutely, Yalda, and you probably know as well as I do that public statements usually are the tip of the iceberg. Usually there's a lot of discussions that happen behind closed doors. Now, I heard what your correspondent said earlier, that perhaps Palestine wasn't given enough prominence or wasn't discussed enough. Actually, he did say the Palestinians deserve better. He did say that Hamas has no role in the future of Palestine, which I think something we could all agree agree with. But more importantly is the point you raised, which is saying that he would like to see Saudi Arabia join the Abraham Accord, but acknowledging Saudi Arabia's sovereignty and that it will do it at its own pace and its own conditions. And, the Saudi government has reiterated more than one crystal clear that that condition will be, first of all, an immediate stop of the hostilities in Gaza, but also an Israeli recognition of a Palestinian state. And short of that, I don't see any progress happening on that front.
Do you now see, and I guess my question is, what are the key takeaways for Saudi Arabia following that speech? For the audience in the room, for Saudis across the country, that perhaps Saudi Arabia is not just a regional power, but Donald Trump is saying, you are my partner and I want to work with you on big global issues, whether that's Ukraine and Russia conflict, whether that's the Iran nuclear deal. And of course, we're going to see him go to Qatar tomorrow, and they've been at the forefront of trying to bring Hamas and Israel together in some kind of ceasefire deal as well.
Yalda, the thing that crossed my mind as I heard the president speak and I'm looking at the people's reaction, there was almost a sigh of comfort. I remembered what Winston Churchill used to say, is that the Americans will always do the right thing after they've tried everything else.
Everything else, yeah.
But, the feeling in the room was like, this is the America we've known. This is the America that came to help liberate Kuwait in the 90s. This is the America that came to save Kosovo and Bosnia. Everything the president said today resonated very well. And as I said earlier, he came across as a statesman, as a man of peace. The amount of times he repeated the word peace, he wants to see peace in Ukraine. He wants to see lifted the sanctions in Syria. He wants a better future for the Palestinians. And guess what? All routes lead to Riyadh. He reiterated and thanked the Saudi government for their efforts in trying to mediate between Ukraine and Russia. And you know what? If that's the case, then both Saudi Arabia and the US are perfectly aligned. And I think everybody left the room feeling that this visit, this speech has been about tomorrow, about the future, about the next 80 years. And from what we've heard today, it's going to be very positive.
Faisal, really good to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us here on the program.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Still to come on the program. Don't go anywhere. We've got lots more. The prosecution star witness, Sean Diddy Coombs' ex-girlfriend, testifies against him in his sex trafficking trial in New York.
show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first.
Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right, i.e. fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display.
I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
Welcome back. We'll focus on other news now and two big trials happening in New York and Paris. First, Kim Kardashian has told a court in Paris how she feared for her life during an armed robbery in the city nearly 10 years ago. The reality TV star tearfully recounted being tied up with duct tape in her hotel room. 10 men are accused of making off on bicycles with her jewelry, including a $4 million engagement ring. Live now to Sky's arts and entertainment correspondent, Katie Spencer, who joins us tonight from Paris. Katie, over to you.
It was a robbery that still haunts Kim Kardashian all these years later. And today she spent 5 hours giving evidence. Because of the way the French legal system works here, there being 10 defendants in this case meant their 10 lawyers were all given the opportunity to question her. And don't forget, this was the first time that she'd been in the same room with some of those who allegedly robbed her that night. She was, she said, terrified by what happened in the hotel room that night. And she still, to this day, she said, recounts just how violated she felt by what happened. Here's what she said in court. She might have seemed poised arriving at the Palais de Justice, but inside for Kim Kardashian, the reality of reliving what was a terrifying ordeal would prove emotional. Coming face to face with the accused almost 9 years after she was robbed at gunpoint. Her lawyer afterwards saying while she forgives, the trauma has stayed with her.
You try to have, generosity in your heart, and someone asks you point blank, please forgive me for what I did to you, and she did. But deep inside, she's still their victim.
Far from being an elite gang of thieves, these are some of the defendants, 2 admitting playing a role, 8 denying they did. Most pensioners and dubbed the grandpa robbers, but their age is no deflection from the terror the star felt as she was dragged around her hotel room. He had a gun up to me. I absolutely did think I was going to die, she told the court, saying he'd pulled me towards him. I'm naked, the robe had opened up. I was certain that was the moment he was going to rape me. She'd been in town for Paris Fashion Week, staying at this luxury penthouse when at 3 a.m. 2 men dressed in police uniforms burst through her door, forcing this man, the concierge, to translate. She said she begged him, what's going to happen to us? Please translate to them, I have babies, I have babies. He said, I don't know if we're going to die.
It was like hysterics, she was terrified, she was terrorized. Yeah, it was a hard time for her also.
Hours before, reporters from around the world had queued to get inside. 490 accredited journalists fighting it out for 30 seats. Behind the media frenzy, here for one of the most recognisable faces in the world, in court, this was less the picture-perfect, composed Kim Kardashian the world is so used to seeing. The filter gone, at times she struggled to get her words out, reliving how afraid she'd felt. Millions of pounds worth of her jewellery has never been returned. But in court, she did receive several defendant apologies, including one from Abbas, who's since written a book about how he'd acted as a lookout.
He's been waiting for this moment, a very important moment for him. Yes, to be able just to say I'm sorry, just to say I'm human, I'm sorry.
Whilst the reality star spoke of having empathy, she said she can't change the trauma she still feels. But walking away, she said she hoped this moment will finally bring some closure. She said she hadn't wanted to ever feel that vulnerable again, and since then, in court, she explained how she'd fundamentally changed how she lives her life. They'd gone now from having one security between the family when they went out to every single member of their family, including her children, all having their own security guards. They no longer trust drivers in different countries who they don't know to drive them around because they don't know whether people might be listening into their conversations and passing on their private details. She said she realises that to some people, the level of security she has now might seem over the top, but because of how she's been left feeling as a result of what happened that night, she says that level of security is the only way that she can now sleep at night. The trial itself now will continue for another 2 weeks.
Katie, thank you so much for bringing us up to date there from Paris. Let's go to New York now, where Cassie, the former girlfriend of Diddy, Combs, has testified against the rapper who is facing sex trafficking and racketeering charges. The R&B singer told the court she was just 22 years old when he asked her to sleep with a male escort while he watched, and that he was frequently violent towards her. He denies all the charges against him. Let's go live now to our Martha Kellner, who joins me from New York. Martha, just give us an update on what happened in court today.
Yeah, Cassie Ventura is the prosecution's star witness, Yalda. She was in a relationship with Sean Combs for just over a decade, which ended in 2018. The prosecution is relying on her to paint a picture of him as a sex trafficker and racketeer, the most serious charges of which he is accused, charges which he denies. Her testimony is perhaps all the more remarkable, given that she is heavily pregnant. In fact, I was speaking to a seasoned trial lawyer earlier who said that she's the most heavily pregnant witness they can ever remember giving evidence in a criminal trial. Her words on the stand, though, have been extremely powerful and emotional, if a little hesitant at times. The level of detail that she's shared of her relationship with Sean Combs, though, has been very disturbing. When Cassie Ventura met Sean Diddy Combs, she was 19, an emerging star with a hit song and a 10-album deal. She never released another album, telling a court her job instead became satisfying Combs's every sexual desire. How is Cassie feeling today? Are you proud of her for testifying? Cassie's husband Alex was in court to hear his wife testify about her previous life in graphic detail. The jury heard that Combs forced her to partake in drug-fuelled sex parties with male prostitutes. He called them freak-offs. The freak-offs became a job, she testified, staying out for days on end, taking drugs and drinking, having sex with a stranger. The longest one was 4 days, more including recovering from the drugs and dehydration. Cassie is 8.5 months pregnant with her third child. Combs's defence lawyer requested that she be prevented from walking to the stand in front of the jury. They might be emotionally swayed by her condition, he argued. The request was denied. Cassie Ventura cried on the stand, wiping away tears as she alleged that Sean Combs controlled every aspect of her life, from what she wore to who she spoke to. The threat of violence in their relationship was constant, she said. Mum, are you still convinced of your son's innocence? Combs's family are in court again. How did you feel hearing that testimony? 6 of his 7 children present to hear claims about his obsession with using baby oil, including forcing Cassie into a blow-up pool filled with it. Lisa Bloom represents an alleged victim of Combs.
I can't imagine being his family, his mother, his children, and hearing these really graphic details about his sex life, but that's what this trial is about.
Real quick. Cassie sobbed as she recalled feeling humiliated by the alleged abuse. The prosecution is relying on her to build a case against Combs as a sex trafficker and racketeer, charges he denies. Her testimony continues. Cassie Ventura has been on the stand now for just over 4 hours. She's been allowed by the judge to take short comfort breaks every 90 minutes, given the fact that she is so heavily pregnant, to ensure that she can continue testifying. We've just been hearing her evidence that Sean Combs gave her a cocktail of drugs during those so-called freak-offs, those drug-fuelled sex parties with male prostitutes. She said that on occasion she would throw up from the effect of so many drugs, but that Combs would encourage her to get up and continue having sexual intercourse. As I say, her testimony is incredibly graphic and very upsetting at times. The prosecution's case continues. Cassie Ventura remains on the stand.
Martha, thank you so much for all of that. Now, we've talked a lot about Donald Trump being a transactional president. He understands the language of the deal. And over the past few months, his two sons, Eric and Donald Trump, have crisscrossed this region to enrich the family purse. Well, let's just have a look. You'll remember that President Trump is already under fire for accepting a luxury Boeing jumbo jet from the Qatari government as the new Air Force One. He wants to use it personally after he leaves office. The Trump Organization has recently signed lucrative deals to build various Trump towers and hotels in Dubai, Riyadh, and Jeddah. They've also signed off on the development of a Trump International Golf Club outside of Doha. And outside of the Middle East, concerns have been raised about how the two brothers are capitalizing on their father's policy changes on cryptocurrency. American Bitcoin, a crypto venture backed by the duo, is due to go public soon. So is Donald Trump acting in the best interest of his country or his wallet? Let's bring in the former White House ethics lawyer, Richard Painter. Thank you so much, Mr. Painter, for joining us here on the program. There's so many questions being asked. If we look first of all at this jumbo jet, believed to be valued about $400 million, a lot of questions about a foreign government giving the president this kind of gift, to replace it, whether it's temporarily or not. Air Force One, is it, in your view, legal?
No, President Trump cannot accept a gift from a foreign government. The Emoluments Clause of the United States Constitution expressly prohibits anyone holding a position of trust with the United States government from accepting a gift or an emolument that's a profit or benefit from a foreign government without consent of Congress. He doesn't have consent of Congress. He can't keep the airplane.
So I guess where does that leave things? Is he going to get the consent of Congress? Because he's saying, why should he pay for this if it's a gift, if it's being offered to him? If Air Force One is, being revamped, it's quite an old aircraft, and Boeing is taking their time. His argument is, why shouldn't I take it?
He has Air Force One, which is an operational aircraft that's quite good. The Boeing is making a brand new Air Force One that will be delivered in about 2 years. What he has is good enough. It's what President Biden used. It's what he used before President Biden. It's a very good airplane. But the most important thing is that we can't have the President of the United States accepting gifts from foreign governments without the consent of the Congress. The founders put the Emoluments Clause in the Constitution for a reason. We cannot have that going on. And I can't imagine a context more troubling than what we have going on in the Middle East. We have a conflict fueled between Hamas and Israel, where Hamas was supported by the government of Qatar for a long time with about $1 billion worth of support. The United States has dumped tens of billions of dollars into that conflict since the October 7 attacks. We've had about 60,000 people killed in Gaza, many of them non-combatants, innocent women and children. We need to bring that conflict to a close. And the President of the United States, when he's visiting the region, should be focusing on working a deal for a ceasefire and a permanent peace for Israel and for a Palestinian state that recognizes Israel, instead of working deals for himself and his family for hotels and golf courses and free airplanes and cryptocurrency deals and the rest of it. He was not elected to do that. He was elected to be President of the United States and to do his job, which right now is peacemaking, diplomacy. That's what we need right now in the Middle East.
Yeah, Mr. Painter, I guess the question, I have about a minute to go. If you're saying it is illegal, he can't accept these sorts of lavish gifts, where does that leave things? What can actually happen now?
Congress could investigate and choose to impeach the president for violating the Constitution. The Republicans will not do that while they control Congress. The Democrats were a very bad check on abuses of power under President Biden when he was in office. But at some point, Congress is going to get fed up with what's going on under the Trump administration and the profiteering by the Trump family, the cryptocurrency deals, and the rest of it, and the abuses of power.
Yeah, Mr. Painter, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us here on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Well, that's it from me and the team on The World Tonight, live from Riyadh. We will, of course, be back tomorrow night at 9 p.m. from Doha, where we'll be following the president as he moves across the Middle East. Good night.